We're so excited to welcome Andrew Yang and the Yang Movement to Nashua. In November 2017, Yang launched his campaign for the Democratic nomination in the 2020 U.S. presidential election. His signature issue is support for what he calls the freedom dividend, a form of universal basic income for every American adult who is 18 and up. Yang believes UBI is a necessary response to the rapid development of automation that is leading to workforce challenges. I am so excited to introduce presidential candidate Andrew Yang.
It's got 60 seconds. For the commercial, meaning I don't do
And if you're a high school Democrat and you're interested in getting involved, you can always talk to me. And yeah.
Seriously, what were most of you doing in terms of thinking about civic life when you were her age? Probably not thinking that much about civic life, so thank you very much. The nature of politics is often you have to hurry up because you're told 5 minutes and it's actually 1. And once in a while you're told it's 3 minutes and it's actually 7. This is the latter.
All right.
How many here would call themselves Yang Gang? All right. The rest of you shortly will be calling yourself Yang Gang.
All right.
All right? I met this guy in January. A friend of mine said, you should meet him. I heard of him, but I didn't know that much. After an hour, I'm like, I like this guy. We're both 44-year-old, first-generation American fathers of 2 who really like math. How can I not like this guy? And then I learned more. We went traveling in the North Country in late March. Spent 2.5 days together. I took him to snowmobile, the ultimate test of whether you're ready for the New Hampshire primary. And it turns out he is ready for the New Hampshire primary. It turns out America is increasingly ready for Andrew Yang. How about started longer than long shot last year in the New York Times, and then last week Emerson had him all by himself nationally in 4th place out of 19 remaining candidates.
Not too shabby.
You're gonna hear him in a while. He's going to take all the selfies you can imagine. He is going to be on a whole lot. This is his 19th visit to New Hampshire, his 54th event. We're going to be multiplying that over the next 3.5 months in New Hampshire because we believe that just like it did for Jimmy Carter in 1976, and Gary Hart in 1984, and John McCain in 2000 and 2008, and Bernie Sanders in 2016, New Hampshire is the ultimate platform that takes a candidate who at the beginning of the process might be Andrew who? And then it begins. And then it begins. And then we find at events 6 months ago, folks are going, Andrew Yang? What the hell is that? I don't know. Why did you support him? I've never even heard of him. And then they hear of him. And then it goes. And then he starts walking to the door. And then you become convinced. And at the end of it, first they ignore you. And then they laugh at you. And then they fight you. And guess what happens on February 11th next year? And then you win. Ladies and gentlemen.
That's how you get a fist up with a candidate.
There you go. There you go. Hello. Hello, Nashua, New Hampshire. It's great to be here. Wow. What a crowd. You know it's a crowd when there's an overflow group outside.
Yep. Yeah. Ocean. Woo, overflow. Ocean.
Thank you
you all, it's great to be back here in New Hampshire. How many of you knew I went to high school here in New Hampshire?
Of course. Oh.
Yes,
Come on.
Phillips Central Academy, 1992. They had me back to speak a few months ago, and I was honest, I said, I haven't been back since graduation because I did not enjoy myself here. The student body got erupted into applause, and it was like, oh my God.
Nobody's ever felt
I
that
hadn't
way.
intended that at all. So after I graduated from Exeter, I went to Brown University, not that far from here. Really? What are you talking about? Brown U, no foreign football team. Didn't know what I do, so I went back. I went to New York for law school. Spent 5 very unhappy months as a lawyer. I don't recommend it. And then I left to start a business. How many of you all have started a business or organization or mailing list or group? So if you have your hand up, you know it's much, much harder than anyone tells you, right?
Yeah.
And then if someone asks you how it's going, what do you say?
Great! Great!
It's going great.
Tony the Tiger.
It's always going great. My business went great until it failed.
Ditto.
That's how I know how hard it is. But I've been bitten by the bug. I said I can get better at this, and so I worked at a series of small growth companies. Eventually became the head of an education company that grew to become #1 in the United States. Was bought by a big company in 2009. My parents started talking to me again. It was very exciting. 2009 was a tough time in a lot of the country. It was probably not quite as rough here in Nashua as it is in other parts of New Hampshire, but how many of you all lived here in New Hampshire 10 years ago? Like, 2009. Like, how was it around that time? It was a tough time in so much of the country, and I thought I had an idea why things had gone so badly for our country. It's because so many of the kids I went to Exeter and Brown and Columbia with had gone to Wall Street and devised these fancy financial instruments, mortgage-backed securities that had crashed the economy. So wow, what a train wreck! This is terrible. And so I quit my job. I donated some money to start a new organization called Venture for America. And I then called rich friends and asked them this question: do you love America? Then the smarter one of them said, what does it mean if I say yes? And I said, at least $10,000. And 12 of them said, I love America for $10,000, like I thought you did. So I spent 7 years building Venture for America, training young entrepreneurs to help create jobs in Detroit, Cleveland, Birmingham, New Orleans. How many of you grew up here in New England? How about the Midwest? Yeah! The South? West Coast?
Represent.
So those of you who grew up in New England, I grew up in upstate New York, and I obviously went to high school and college in New England, so I'm like you. And I spent 7 years traveling the Midwest and the South, and I was blown away by the disparity between what was going on in certain other parts of the country and the coast in particular, where when you fly between Michigan and Manhattan, or St. Louis and San Francisco, you feel like you're crossing dimensions and decades and ways of life. And I was trying to absorb what this all meant, and then Donald Trump became my president in 2016. There are some people here that are happy about the result, I guarantee you.
Yeah.
And it's cool, because we get all kinds here in the Yang Gang. But I reacted like the people who were stunned and shocked, where I said, oh my gosh, this is a giant red flag. Tens of millions of Americans decided to take a bet on the narcissist reality TV star as president. That was a very, very big gamble, and so people must have felt a certain way to make that bet. And I spent 7 years getting accolades and awards for this organization I started, Venture for America. I was recognized by the Obama administration, got to meet the president several times. And I had this sinking feeling in the last several years that I was pouring water into a bathtub that had a giant hole ripped in the bottom. That any good we were doing was being outweighed by the fact that the economy is changing in fundamental ways. And then Donald Trump becomes our president. And if you just turned on cable news today and tried to figure out, why is Donald Trump our president? What would you think based upon the cable news programs? Russia. Facebook.
Trolls.
Twitter. Emails. Facebook. FBI. Hillary Clinton. Emails. All mixed together, right? Into some very strange cocktail.
Like Rocky Road.
But to me, these explanations fell short. I'm a numbers guy. And so when you dig into the numbers, the explanation that seemed most powerful and direct was that we had automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Iowa. If that list of states sounds familiar, those are the states that Donald Trump needed to win and did win. Here in New Hampshire, you had a similar manufacturing job laws, it was just a slightly different time frame. And if you go to the northern part of the state, then you see that, where these manufacturing plants closed. But then that swept through the Midwest, and if you don't think this is what got Donald Trump into office, there's actually a direct correlation between the adoption of industrial robots in a voting area and the movement to Trump, district by district. One of the strongest correlations anyone can find. We're in the midst of the greatest economic transformation in the history of our country, what experts are calling the fourth industrial revolution. When's the last time you heard a politician say the words fourth industrial revolution?
Just now.
Just now, that's right. And I'm barely a politician. I'm kind of an accidental politician. Stumbled into it. Oh, it's cool. Thank you for being here. You're too young even to vote for my re-election.
Get involved.
I love how kid-friendly this nostalgia is. It's awesome. There's a moment where I was like, 10-year-olds in a bar? And I realized it must be a very, very kid-friendly bar.
It's a family pub.
So when you think about the changes in our country, New Hampshire, and if you think about the changes that happen to the manufacturing workers, how many of you have noticed stores closing around where you live here in New Hampshire? And why are those stores closing? Amazon, that's right. Amazon's sucking up $20 billion in value every single year, closing 30% of America's stores and malls. How much did Amazon pay in taxes last year?
0.
That's right. That's the math, New Hampshire. 20 billion out, 0 back. The most common job in most of the country is working as a retail clerk. The average retail worker is a 39-year-old woman making between $9 and $11 an hour. So what is she going to do when her store or mall closes?
Welfare?
How many of you have seen those self-serve kiosks at McDonald's and the other fast food restaurants?
Yeah.
McDonald's says they're going to be in every location in the U.S. by 2021. And the third most common job in the United States is food preparation and food service. When you all call the customer service line of the big company and you get the bot, you probably do the same thing I do, which is you pound 000.
Yeah.
You're like, and then you breathe a sigh of relief when the human picks up. You're like, oh God, I escaped the machine. And now with the human. In 2 or 3 years, the software is going to sound like this. Hey Andrew, how's it going? What can I do for you? It'll be efficient, delightful, apparently a little bit sexy.
Thank
You
you.
might not even realize it's software. What is that going to mean for the 2.5 million Americans who answer a phone for a living right now in call centers who make $14 an hour? I was just with 70 CEOs and I asked them point blank, I said, how many of you are looking at replacing your back office clerical workers with AI and software? Guess how many hands went up out of 70? All of them, all 70. The truth is you can fire that CEO if he doesn't make that trade. Because if you come to that company with software that can replace hundreds or thousands of workers for a licensing fee, then every CEO will do that deal. This is the nature of the fourth industrial revolution, and Donald Trump is not the cause of our problems. He's a symptom. He's a manifestation of the fact that things have been changing on the ground in ways that have been making Americans miserable for years. And the thing I'm most concerned about moving forward, how many of you all know a truck driver here in New Hampshire? Yep. Driving a truck is the most common job in 29 states in this country, 3.5 million truckers. And my friends in California are working on trucks that can drive themselves. Why? For the money. $168 billion a year if they can successfully automate away truck driving jobs. They tell me they're 98% of the way there. Some of my friends are literally working at these companies. Now, 98% sounds like a lot, but 2% is a really big problem if you're talking about semi-trucks. You can't have trucks just smashing into things 2% of the time and be like, oh, well, it worked under 98%. And the self-driving trucks are really bad with something called snow, because they rely upon road markings. So how do they think they can get the last 2%? Do you all remember the first time you watched TV on your phone? Remember that? You're like, wow, we can do that now. It's probably football highlights. That was 3G. We're now rolling out 5G, and the plan for these trucks is to have a teleoperator sitting in a warehouse in Nevada or Arizona who's sitting there, and then the truck in another part of the country then alerts them that it doesn't know what to do because of bad weather, let's say. So then the teleoperator in Nevada beams into the truck and starts driving like a video game. Because the truck has cameras on the front that are 5G enabled, and so then they can just see out the front of it from their warehouse in Nevada and just drive it on the screen in front of them. They can see the road. And then when the computer is confident and knows what to do, then it beams them back out. What do you think the ratio will be between teleoperators in Nevada and Arizona and the 3.5 million truckers?
Good.
1 to 20? Something along those lines, maybe 1 to 5%. What is that going to mean for the 3.5 million Americans who drive a truck for a living right now, or the 7 million Americans who work in truck stops, motels, diners, and retail establishments that rely upon the truckers getting out and having a meal? We're talking about the lifeblood of a lot of the middle of the country. So what happened to the manufacturing workers is now ripping through other parts of the economy. I've spent time looking at each of these problems in turn, and before I decided to run for president, I went to Washington, D.C. And I said, what are we going to do to wake up our fellow citizens to the fact that it is not immigrants causing these problems? It is technology and the fact that our economy is evolving in fundamental ways. And what do you think the folks in Washington, D.C. said to me when I said, what are we going to do? Number one, we cannot talk about that. Number two, we should study that. Number three, we must educate all Americans for the jobs of the future. And that sounds so politician-y. And then I said, look, I checked out the studies. You all want to guess how effective the government-funded training programs were for the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs in the Midwest? 0 to 15%. That's right, they were total dud. Thank you, gang. And when I said that to the folks in D.C., you know what they said next? I guess we'll get better at it. That's what counts as policy out of D.C. And then someone in D.C. said something that actually brought me here to you all tonight. He said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. No one here will do anything about this set of problems because this is not a town of leaders, this is a town of followers. And the only way we will do anything about it is if you create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. And I said, challenge fucking accepted.
Yeah! Hell yeah!
This is the wave. This is where the revolution gets started. How many people are in this room? What's the fire code?
Math is hard.
This looks like, okay, so let's say the fire code is 200 people. So there are 199 people here.
One person's not.
And each of you is worth your weight in gold. How many presidential candidates have you seen so far in the cycle? So raise your hands like 5, and 2 hands is 10. Look at that, 10 plus 10. Look at that. 10.
Go to the convention. We saw that.
You all have so much. The reason you're holding your hands up and you have these numbers is because all of the candidates have done the same math I have done. Do you know how many Californians each New Hampshire voter is worth? 1,000. 1,000, that's right. So if there are 200 people in this bar, this is the equivalent of 5 football stadiums of California. Right here. In
Yeah!
That's the kind of room you launch a revolution from. This is all it takes. In most of the country, they look up and say, my vote doesn't matter, we have these giant government pipes that are clogged with money, billions of dollars, and they've given up hope. And you know what? They are largely correct. Most of their votes don't matter. That's why I love coming to New Hampshire, because here, your votes can flush the pipes out. This is a magical place where democracy still functions the way it's intended, where your votes can actually change the course of history. So the question is, what is the vision that you want to take to the rest of the country in 2020? If you're here tonight, at some point you heard this. There's an Asian man running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month. And you remember hearing that. And the first time you heard that, it sounded like a gimmick. It sounded too good to be true. It sounded like it would never happen. But if you dig into our country's history, you find it's certainly not Andrew Yang's idea Thomas Paine was for it at the founding of the country, called it the citizen's dividend. Martin Luther King fought for it in the 60s, called it the guaranteed minimum income for all Americans, and it is what he was fighting for when he was assassinated in 1968. 1,000 economists endorsed it. It passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Nixon. It was called the Family Assistance Plan. Came this close. And then 11 years later, one state passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that, New Hampshire?
Alaska!
And how do they pay for it?
Oil!
And what is the oil of the 21st century?
Data!
Marijuana, that's right, New Hampshire. It's not marijuana. It's technology, AI, software, big data, self-driving cars and trucks. You all saw the study that came out a little while ago that said that our data is now worth more than oil. Have you all seen that?
Yep.
Do you remember getting a data check in the mail?
Yeah.
Oh, you know who got your data check?
Amazon?
Amazon, Facebook, Google, all these companies have been profiting off of our data to the tune of billions and billions of dollars. Then how much they pay in taxes? Zero near zero. That's a 21st century economy for you. And just to walk through the mechanics a little bit with you, if I'm a global tech company, I don't want to pay taxes, so I just put the money to Ireland. I compensate my executives in stock options and stock packages that then get my expenses down. I invest in and buy new businesses. If Amazon's paying zero in taxes, whose fault is it? Ours. It's our fault. It's not their fault. And I want you to visualize in Jeff Bezos' office when the accountants and the CFO come in and say, Jeff, great news, zero taxes again. And then what does Jeff do? Jeff goes to his vault in the back, takes out stacks of gold coins, they put them in a vehicle, they drive home, and they do one of those like gold coin bags, excuse me, duck. You know what that's
DuckTales.
That is their job. Their job is to try and minimize the tax burden. It is our job to make sure they can't do it. It's your job, New Hampshire, to make sure they can't do it. Instead of turning on each other and saying like, oh, the dentist needs to pay more taxes, we have to go where the money is. The money is going to the crowd. It's going to the big winners of the 21st century economy, and our communities are getting sucked dry. So number one is we have to put the money back into our hands. And after I'm president, thank you, New Hampshire. After I'm president, you start getting the freedom dividend, which is virtually named after the state. When you start getting the freedom dividend and it's in your pockets, what are you going to do with it in real life?
Give it to Sally Mae.
Give it to Sally Mae. Not a good ROI. No, it's a true story.
It's too late for us.
Daycare. It's going to stay right here in New Hampshire. All of it. Most of it, not all of it.
That's not true. You're going to buy Amazon. Come on.
Yeah,
You're going to buy something on Amazon.
You go a little bit more on Amazon, you might upgrade your Netflix subscription. But most of it would stay right here in New Hampshire. Might go to this establishment. You might buy an extra beer.
Yeah. True investment.
So this is the trickle-up economy. It would create jobs right where we work and live. It makes us stronger, healthier, mentally healthier, less stressed out, improves our relationships, decreases domestic violence, decreases hospital visits. This is the economy that you can make real very, very quickly. And it makes me so happy to be able to say that and say that you all have that power, but you do. This is the magical land of New Hampshire, where you can do whatever you want. You can take this country wherever you see fit in 2020. So this is the vision of a trickle-up economy. And the biggest problem is that right now our energies are not going to solving the problems of our time. How many of you got excited about GDP when you woke up this morning? You were like, I'm going to make a big contribution today. This is going to be a big GDP day. I know we all laugh because it's so ridiculous. And I like to talk about my family, my wife who's at home with my two boys, our two boys. We had it together. She did the vast majority of the work. I was there. Our two boys, one of whom is autistic, what does her work at home with our boys calculated at in GDP every day? Zero. And we know that's nonsense. We know that's perverse. We know that the work she's doing is among the most challenging and important work that can be done in our society. So GDP was something we made up almost 100 years ago. And even the inventor of GDP said this is a terrible measurement for national well-being. We should not use it as that. And here we are 100 years later, it's following it. To give you a sense of how off base it is, record high GDP, also at record highs right now in America. Stress, financial anxiety and insecurity, student loan debt, even suicides and drug overdoses. It has gotten so bad that America's life expectancy has declined for the last 3 years on record. First time, when's the last time that happened? Spanish flu of 1918, global pandemic that killed millions. Last time America's life expectancy declined 3 years in a row. In 100 years.
Yeah, in Iowa.
So think about that for a second. We're back in Spanish flu territory because suicides and drug overdoses have surged past vehicle deaths, cause of death. You talk about why Donald Trump's our president. Meanwhile, we're cheerleading this phantom GDP stat even as our communities are struggling and suffering. So if you're not excited about GDP when you wake up in the morning, what actually would get you excited if I said this got better in Nashua, Indiana?
$1,000.
Cash.
Income and affordability. Income and affordability, yeah, that would make you excited. What else might make you excited?
Affordable housing.
Health and life expectancy. Affordable housing, clean air and clean water. How about mental health and freedom from substance abuse? How about childhood success rates?
Yeah.
So these are the real problems of the 21st century that we need to get to solving. And so it will be my privilege as your president to go to the Bureau of Economic Analysis and say, hey, GDP, 100 years old, really out of date, not really telling us a whole lot, so we're going to change it. We're going to switch it to the American scorecard that integrates our health and life expectancy, our mental health, our environmental quality, how our kids are doing. And I will report how we are doing by these measurements, the measurements that matter, every year at the State of the Union. I will be the first president to use a PowerPoint deck at the State of the Union.
What have we done?
What standards are
that we can take to the rest of the country as quickly as possible. I am now as high as 4th in the nation in recent polls. And what is the #1 criteria that Democrats have for the nominee?
Donations.
Beat Donald Trump.
Oh yeah, that too.
I am one of only 2 candidates in the field that 10% or more of Donald Trump voters say they will support. So if I am the nominee, we win the whole thing in 2020. Woo! That's the math. So right now you have Joe Biden still in the lead because everyone believes he is the best bet to beat Donald Trump in 2020. But when Americans wake up to the fact that there's another sure bet in the field, you're going to see our numbers grow and grow and grow. That is the vision that we have to take to the rest of New Hampshire. They have to start to meet. And I can see that I am the candidate that's bringing in disaffected Trump voters. There might be some in this room. Yep. Thank you, brother. Libertarians.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Libertarians are usually shy in this bar. Independents. The politically disengaged. As well as Democrats and progressives.
Yeah.
A much broader coalition to beat Donald Trump in 2020. Donald Trump told a story in 2016. He said that it's immigrants that are causing the problems and he's going to make America great again. And what was Hillary Clinton's response?
Give me money.
America's already great. Remember that? America's already great. And that did not work. Donald Trump got some of the problems right, but his solutions were the opposite of what we need. What were his solutions?
Build a
We're
wall.
going to build a wall.
Bring
We're
jobs
going to
back.
turn the clock back. We're
No
going to bring the old
refugees.
jobs back. We have to do the opposite of these things. We have to turn the clock forward, New Hampshire. We have to accelerate our economy and society to address the real challenges of the 21st century. And we need to evolve in the way we think about work and value. And I am the ideal candidate for that job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you.
Yeah! Yeah!
Thank you all. I love you guys so much. And I'd love to take some questions. She's right behind me. I can just give her my two.
Welcome back to New Hampshire.
Who's talking high school?
So I am a special education teacher currently in Nashua.
Woo! Thank you!
Thank you for the job that she was doing. A couple of questions I have, I think two-part. One is, what truly are your feelings on charter schools and the funding of them? And secondly, how do we reconcile ourselves again with a non-politician, not that politics is good, but once again, we have a business person coming in and saying, we're having that governmental experience and it's a mess right now. But how do we reconcile the fact that we have these wonderfully, exciting ideas of all these classrooms and $1,000 sounds great. But it doesn't pay for health insurance, it doesn't pay for a lot of things, just for some things, but how do we kind of reconcile ourselves around that and make some even
Thank you. Those are great questions. Let's give her another round of applause.
Yeah!
I love special ed teachers. It seems like everyone feels the same way. So the first question is about charter schools. And I said at the last debate, I'm pro good schools, whatever that means. Now, I think ideally, these are things that are independent of what type of school. We have to pay teachers more. The data clearly shows that good teachers. And that's not like a feel-good thing. The data clearly shows that a good teacher improves educational outcomes across dozens of students and they're worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it doesn't make sense to invest more teachers to recruit and retain the best teachers we can enlist in the society. Number two, we need to lighten up on the emphasis on standardized tests and test scores. It's impossible for teachers to do their job. And just a little bit of a history lesson. We came up with the SAT during World War II to figure out which kids we did not want to send to the front line. And now we're treating every year like it's wartime. And we're bludgeoning our kids with these tests. We're constraining human possibility year after year, and it does not make sense. And they also keep teachers doing that. The third thing is that the data also clearly shows that 2/3 of our kids' educational outcomes are determined outside of the school. So that's parental time with the child, words read to them when they're young, stress levels in the house, parental income, yes, type of neighborhood, number of adults in the household. These are the variables that account for 2/3 of our kids' academic performance. And so right now we're putting teachers in an impossible situation where we're like, you're 100% responsible for educating your kids, but you can only control a third of it, and the stuff that's going on in the other 2/3 you have no control over. Educators know this. And so what we have to do is we have to put money directly into the homes and the families and give the kids an honest chance to learn and our teachers a better chance to teach. So that's the freedom dividend and another policy that actually just strengthen the family directly. Now, the question about charter schools, many charter schools arose in places where the public schools had problems. And I've looked at the data. There are good charter schools and there are bad charter schools. There are good public schools and there are bad public schools. I have friends who work in both types of schools, and you know what they have in common? They love to teach, they love their kids, they're earnest educators, they just do the best work they can every day. And some of them have spent years building up a school to try and be successful. And so to me, any attack on literally like dozens or hundreds of schools cuts those educators' work. It gives them the short end of the stick, because in their case, they're just showing up to schools every single day. The question about another non-politician. First, I have to say Donald Trump is not all entrepreneurs and non-politicians. I mean, like, Donald Trump's a jackass because he's a jackass. He's not a jackass because he wasn't in government for like 30 years. But I will say that I am the last person who would run around saying I'm going to run the government like a business, because they're completely different things with completely different needs and leadership styles. If you're the head of a business, which I have been, then you can tell people, hey, we're going to go in this direction, and they pretty much get on board. That is not the way government really works. The way government works is much more analogous to running a national nonprofit, which I've also done, which is you have to set a vision and a course, and then you try and generate consensus and get energy around that vision and just move people in that direction. But they can do what they want at the end of the day. And that is the way I would lead as president. So enthusiastic, and I can also get the mic to you. So let's get this.
Thank you, Andrew Yang. So I have a question. The 2013 launch of healthcare.gov highlighted the government's inability to compete with tech giants in creating a modern, scalable, cloud-based web applications. One of the speculated reasons for failure is the government's inability to recruit top programming talent, either due to lower salaries, less trendy benefits, or stiff dress codes. A lot of your own proposals, like democracy dollars, tax day overhauls, and election reform, would require web development efforts on par with healthcare.gov. How would you, as the next president of America, avoid repeating the mistakes of the Obama administration and make sure that you attract top-tier development talent and make functional web applications?
This is a great question. And if you look at the genesis of healthcare.gov, you know what they did? They did what the government does, which is here's like a giant contract to a giant consulting firm and go do it. And then lo and behold, the giant consulting firm dropped the ball, and then they had to run to Silicon Valley to get this squad of talented programmers to try and recover the thing and like fix the whole mess. And that is an example of a failing of our government right now, which you're 100% correct that the government is having a hard time recruiting the people that it needs in those sorts of fields. I will say one thing I am exceptional at is building teams that want to get the job done with a minimum of bureaucracy. And I'm friends directly with some of the tech leaders. We could build awesome teams by liberating them from this strange dress code and pay scale, and you have to come to the DC office and sit in the cubicle. What they ended up doing when they enlisted the programmers to fix it, they loosened up all of that stuff. They said, hey, guess what? We're going to get people to fix it, and we're not going to hold you to the same bureaucratic standards that we ordinarily do. So under my administration, we would start there. We wouldn't screw up the first time and then loosen up the bureaucracy. We would start by getting the people we need. And I guarantee you all, under the Yang administration, there are going to be some of the best technical talent in the world that want to help us solve these problems.
Woo! Ow! Ow! Woo!
How many of you saw that Elon Musk endorsed me last month? And it's not just Elon. Jack Dorsey, Sam Altman, Alexis Ohanian, all have either donated to or supporting my campaign in some form or fashion. Techies, and when I talk to them too, it's like techies, if you go to them and say, hey, are you automating away the jobs? A lot of them say yes. And then you ask them, how do you feel about it? And they say, terrible. And then you say, do you want to do something about it? And they say, yeah, I do want to do something about it. Right now, the unrealistic standard we're holding them to is that they're somehow going to figure out all the downstream impacts of innovation in a lab, and then say this is going to end up dislocating workers in Michigan, like 10 states away. Like they can't figure that out. Whose job is it to figure that out? The government. We're just so used to a government that's decades behind, that's asleep at the switch. Our government is 24 years behind on technology right now. And how can I be so precise on the date? It's because we got rid of the Office of Technology Assessment in 1995.
What?
What ideal timing. We were like, it's 1995. 30. I guess we're done. That's why it's so embarrassing where our government is right now. How many of you saw the congressional hearing that Zuckerberg visited?
Yeah.
And you weren't being horrified by the questions they were asking? That was not a surprise visit. It wasn't like, oh, Zuckerberg's here, let's just ask him whatever question. Those are the questions they came up with after weeks of research with their policy team. Think about that. We have to drag DC into the 21st century, but it will not happen on its own. It will not. They do not have the incentives to self-modernize. That's why that guy told me no one in this town is going to do anything about it. If they screw up on our behalf, nothing bad happens to them. That is the problem. That is not the way our working worlds are. Like if you screw up, something bad happens to you. Truly, right?
Yeah.
If they screw up, life keeps on going. Washington, this is what the problem is. Washington, D.C. is now the richest per capita metro area in the country. Think about that for a second. This is what we have to affect and change. We have to get the incentives right in D.C. and we need to drag them into the 21st century, and I am the man for that job.
Woo! Yeah!
I also just want to point out that we have raised billions of dollars in increments of only $24 each. So we are the cheapest donors there are, even cheaper than Bernie's. No one thought it was possible. This is the cheapest gang to join and the most wholesome. If you donate $25, you're an above average member of the gang.
Yeah!
But there is zero corporate PAC money in there. You know, that's one reason why the solutions I'm proposing, they're all human solutions. They're not what the corporations want, they're just what we want. Yes, sir.
So, if you win, which I hope you do, I'm a teacher, history teacher I'm from Massachusetts. So.
Represent! Woo!
And I've had to teach for a long time about how the laws and stuff are made. So you win, and you have all these great ideas. How do you get them passed?
Ooh.
I love this question. So check it out. I do well in Iowa. The expectations, are such that we blow past them. We come here to New Hampshire, and then you all plant the flag and say it's Andrew Yang time.
Yeah.
And then imagine the headlines in February of 2020, where it's like, what just happened? Andrew Yang just beat Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren in New Hampshire. Just imagine those headlines around the world. And then America wakes up and says, we can do this. And then I win. And the question you have is, how do we pass these laws and make them happen? So imagine Democrats, after I'm in office in 2021, they are so pumped to have beaten Donald Trump, take a bet on this somewhat novel figure, but now they love me because I beat Donald Trump, and everyone's like, yes, let's do this thing. Yeah. And why did I win? Because of the dividend. Everyone knows that. It's like, the dividend.
Duh.
Andrew Yang wins. The Democrats and progressives are like, heck yes, let's get more money into the hands of children and families, make us stronger and healthier. But here's the kicker. The Republicans look up and say, wait a minute, am I against the dividend? Alaska, that's the only state that's had a dividend for almost 40 years, is a deep red conservative state. It was passed by a Republican governor who said this: who would you rather get the oil money, the government who's just going to mess it up somehow, or you, the people of Alaska? And then the people of Alaska said us, and now it's wildly popular decades in. I don't need 80% of Congress to pass the dividend, I just need a majority. And can you imagine their phone lines in offices if they're standing against the dividend, being like, oh, the money's going to hurt you?
How dare you?
Can you imagine their office after I'm president, and I'm like, hey, Andrew Yang wants to give you the dividend. It's very hard to demonize cash in the same way you can demonize other things. And again, we don't need 80%. And many conservatives really like the dividend. You know what they hate? Giant bureaucracies make everyone's decisions for them. That's what they hate. You know what they don't mind? Americans being able to make their own decisions through economic autonomy. Like, this is not something that is left or right, it's forward. And then I want you to imagine... So then you get the dividend passed, and can you imagine how America would feel? It'd be like, oh my gosh, what is this feeling? The government has done something I really like. It makes my life better. It's really happening. And then we'll have that feeling, and we want that feeling again. And Republicans can sense that I'm non-ideological. I just want to solve the problem. So then we'll start to get other things done that are bipartisan historically, like infrastructure. Like things that we can agree on. And there are many things I can do that help modernize the economy that they are not against. Like if you look at it right now, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, just came out and said, we need to overhaul our economy so it works for people and start looking at things beyond shareholder value. My modernization efforts will get a lot of bipartisan support because there are a lot of people who are Republicans who understand economics and the fact that we have to evolve.
Woo!
History is my favorite subject going on, man. I think the history is really yeah, I should think. Miss, let me give you the mic.
Shut up, so
Well,
I got a book.
Do you think that Trump's impeachment process will take too much media attention away from the primary, and how will this affect your campaign?
I love this question because we were having this conversation on the way over here. I got on board with the impeachment decision earlier this week, but I do think that every moment we are talking about Donald Trump is a victory for Donald Trump, and that includes when we're talking about impeaching Donald Trump. What the Democrats need.
Woo! Common sense.
He's like a creature that thrives on media attention.
It's like Godzilla.
Media attention that comes his way, even if it's about impeachment, makes him stronger. What the Democrats need is a new vision that excites Americans and we can see ourselves in. We need a vision that makes us think that we're making progress in solving the problems on the ground that got Trump elected.
Yeah.
So to the extent that the impeachment media spotlight ends up drawing attention away from that vision, I think it's not good for the country. I think it might be something that we have to overcome. That said, this campaign is growing so quickly that I believe we're going to be in position to break through and pierce even the media fixation on impeachment. So I'm going to let you guys in on a little bit of inside baseball, but the Q3 fundraising number is going to come out on October 1st, and we're going to surprise a lot of people.
Oh yeah! Woo! Woo!
So we have reached a point now where the press will give us our fair shake, and that even the buzz around impeachment is not going to hold us back. One more question.
Oh man, I'm thinking the number 1 to 3, and it's an even number. Somebody yell it out.
Right here.
She's got a good one. I believe in her. She's confident. She got a mic. It's good.
Thank you so much. How do you feel the freedom dividend and your presidency can get America on board in turning the tide of climate change? Woo!
How many of you all are concerned about climate change? Raise your hand. Yes. You know what that means? You are awake. Sentient. If you watched the debate in Detroit, you remember me staking out the third position in American politics on climate change. Position number 1, we have to fight climate change. Position number 2, climate change is a hoax. And then position number 3, it's worse than you think, and we need to have very, very dramatic measures to move forward. So here's some of the data points that I took very, very much to heart. July was the warmest month in human history. 4 last years have been the 4 warmest years in history. Greenland just said that their ice pack is melting at the rate projected in 2070 today, 51 years ahead of time. And these glaciers and other ice formations are a bit like ice cubes in our glasses of soda. You know, you put the ice cube in the soda, and then for a little while it doesn't look like it's melting? And then when it starts to melt, it starts melting very, very quickly. That's unfortunately the way glaciers work too. Is that when they start to melt, they melt slowly, but then they actually accelerate in the melting process. And we're already actually in the acceleration zone where Greenland's concerned and some others. So we need to take very, very dramatic steps to help fight climate change. But I agree with you, the questioner, that the freedom dividend is actually tied to making progress on climate change in a very important way. Because right now when you go to Americans and say, hey, we need to fight climate change, and those Americans are having trouble paying their bills because 78% of us are living paycheck to paycheck, almost half of us can't afford an unexpected $500 bill. So if you have your head down and you're worried about making next month's rent, and I come to you and say, hey, climate change, what's a very human response? I can't worry about next year, I'm worried about today. I'm worried about tomorrow. And studies have shown that if you can't pay your bills, it has the functional impact of occupying your mental bandwidth to the point that it decreases your functional IQ by 13 points, or 1 standard deviation. So if you think that Americans are getting less reasonable, less rational, less forward-looking, less optimistic, we almost certainly are, because we can't pay our bills. So if you get the boot off of our throats through the freedom dividend, you go back to that same parent who right now can't think about climate change and say, hey, we need to make progress. They'll look at their son or daughter and say, yes, yes we do. So the freedom dividend helps move us forward quickly, and we'll end up generating more of a consensus around fighting climate change. And I proposed a $5 trillion plan to help fight climate change, which includes moving towards more sustainable sources of energy here in the U.S., trying to compete to make renewable energy production more competitive globally, because right now what's happening is that China is going to Africa, and what are they saying? They're saying, here's a power plant, it burns coal. What do you think? And then what does Africa say?
We'll take your money.
I'll take your money.
Take power.
Because Africa's not like, oh, and how sustainable is this? Like, they're just like, great, let's burn some coal, let's get some energy. So what the U.S. has to do is it has to go to those developing countries and say, don't burn coal at the power plant. Here are some solar panels, here are some wind turbines, we're going to subsidize them. We also have to not just do less of the bad, but we have to do more of the good, which means planting trees and reforesting tracts of land around the world. It means reseeding our oceans with plankton and other plant life to try and revive the ecosystems, because here, we're all pretty close to the coast. The Atlantic Ocean is losing 4 to 8% of its biomass every year. And I was just in Portsmouth, and there was a multi-million-dollar shrimping business that went to zero because they just lost their yield to that degree. So the changes are on, and we need to aggressively move ourselves in the direction while also trying to protect ourselves and our people. When there's a natural disaster, who suffers the most?
Poor people.
Poor people. People who don't have a car to get into to drive to safety. People whose shelter is not as modern and well designed. So by putting money into our hands, we're going to be better able to protect ourselves, be able to make progress individually. And then the last step I would take is that we have to have a constitutional amendment that says it's up to us to safeguard the earth for future generations. Looking at climate change, we have to fight it, we have to speed up. But the fastest way to speed up on it is to get our heads up. And right now, too many Americans have their heads down, and we can change that. Do you want to change it with me, New Hampshire? Yeah!
Yeah, you.
One more time for Andrew Yang. Here's what we're going to do. Part of the job of being a major candidate for president, the media, they just want all of it. So we're going to do a quick gaggle, that's what they call it in the business. Take some questions. It's going to take a few minutes. In the meantime, I bet some of you might like to get a picture.
Yep. Yeah.
Said candidate. So we're going to try to do this in a nice way. And I have that
Oh, they do. They got that little in. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. Might have some more updates later. Peace out.